Let's talk about Japan in the late 1980s. It was an era of just unbelievable economic frenzy, a time when it felt like the entire country was on a rocket ship. Today, we're going to dive deep into the absolutely wild story of Japan's bubble economy.
So, what was fueling all this? Well, it really boils down to one simple, incredibly powerful idea that everyone seemed to share. Land prices in Japan would never ever fall. And this wasn't just a hunch or an opinion, people treated it like a fundamental law of the universe. And it became the engine that powered a whole nationwide frenzy.
Let's dance!
And, that belief, it created an atmosphere that was just electric. Just try to imagine it. A whole society where the future felt truly limitless. We're talking about Tokyo's nights blazing with neon signs, super exclusive luxury clubs packed to the gills every single evening, and this amazing disco culture that basically became the soundtrack for a generation that was absolutely convinced they were on top of the world.
All right, so let's get into the first part of our story, the dazzling light. This was the peak of the boom, an era where it really seemed like there were no limits to how much wealth could be created. You see, everything was feeding into everything else. It was like this giant, self-fulfilling prophecy. The stock market, the Nikkei index, was just soaring. It hit almost 39,000 at its peak. And at the same time, land values were going through the roof. There was this famous, kind of crazy saying that the small patch of land under Tokyo's Imperial Palace was worth more than all the real estate in California combined. It just reinforced this widespread belief in endless growth.
And here's the thing. This wasn't just some high finance game for bankers and skyscrapers. No, this was something that touched everyone. It became part of the culture. You'd hear people talking about making a killing in the stock market everywhere, in the back of a taxi, while grabbing a bowl of ramen, in living rooms all across the country. It made the dream of becoming a millionaire feel completely within reach for just about anyone.
But like any wild party, it couldn't last forever. And when it ended hard. Almost overnight, the music just stopped. The dazzling light of the 80s blinked out, leading to a sudden, shocking collapse that kicked off in 1990. The party was officially over.
So how did it happen so fast? Well, after that insane peak in the late 80s, the trigger was pulled in 1990. The Bank of Japan, trying to tap the brakes on this superheated economy, started raising interest rates. The idea was to cool things down, right? But the effect? Oh man, it was absolutely catastrophic. The stock and real estate markets didn't just cool down, they went into an absolute freefall.
What we saw here was this brutal collision between belief and reality. On one hand, you had this powerful feeling that the future was limitless, that the sky was the limit. And on the other, the cold, hard reality that asset values were crashing hard. That core idea, the one that started it all, that land prices would never fall, was completely and utterly shattered.
And the collapse of the bubble? Well, this wasn't some quick fix. It wasn't over in a few months. Instead, it cast this long, dark shadow over the entire nation for years, changing Japan's economy and its society in some really profound ways.
Because this crash had a real, devastating human cost. We're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here. Think about all the companies that had borrowed huge amounts of money against their ridiculously overvalued property. Poof, they went bankrupt. And what about ordinary people? Folks who took out massive loans to buy a home were suddenly trapped, saddled with these enormous debts that were worth way more than their property.
This really tough, prolonged period of struggle actually got its own name: Japan's lost decades. It's the term people use to describe the years of slow growth, something called deflation. That's when prices are actually falling, and just this general feeling of economic stagnation that really defined Japan for most of the 90s and even into the 2000s. It was a direct legacy of the bubble bursting.
So, after hearing this incredible story of boom and bust, what are the big takeaways? What do we learn from all this? Let's break down a few key lessons that are, frankly, still super relevant today.
Okay, lesson number 1. Mass belief is a crazy powerful thing. It can literally create an economic reality, at least for a while. Lesson 2, when things are growing that fast, that dizzyingly, it can hide some really serious risks just beneath the surface. And finally, lesson 3, the collapse of a bubble like this isn't a clean break. It's messy, and its echoes, its consequences can last for decades, affecting entire generations.
And that really leaves us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? In our world today, with all its own volatile markets and new kinds of assets popping up all the time, what can we learn from Japan's experience? This isn't just a story from the past. It's a really powerful, timeless cautionary tale about speculation, ambition, and the psychology of the crowd. Thanks for joining me on this one.
Bodycon Japan.